So as you can see, if you produce a separate set of accounting standards for SMEs, it might actually, and that's what the ANC also wrote in its letter, it might reduce comparability on a local level, even though it might improve comparability at the European level. It might lower comparability at the lower level because you introduce a next gap, meaning that there will be 3 gaps being applied by French, by companies listed on Altenex Paris, rather than 2. So there are many, let's say, elements to this discussion that need to be taken into account when dealing with a matter like this. Another illustration is the biggest alternative investment market, which is AIM in London. AIM does require IFRS. It does not allow local GAAP. So all those companies apply IFRS, or are required to do so, and there are no exemptions for SMEs. So within the EU, we already have differences between stock exchanges requiring different things also for SMEs. So what do investors think? In that same market in the UK, questions were asked to investors who specifically focus on SMEs on the unregulated market. And I think consistent with what Olivier said, what they said is, well, we actually want to see an alignment of financial reporting side, with the business side. So we want to see the business model, the principal risks and uncertainties being reflected there, and the link to financial performance, judgment and estimates, etc. No new separate set of standards. So this is one of those inputs that Nicolas was referring to, different views that are being expressed. Here we see no real need for a separate set of standards for SMEs. However, and that's interesting, they would welcome a reduced disclosure requirement for SMEs in less relevant areas. So apparently there is some interest in doing something for SMEs. So where does that lead us? So what are some of the considerations and the potential way forward? Some advantages of separate set of standards for SMEs in the growth market, of course, is that separate set of standards can be tailor-made to the needs of investors in SME growth markets. And that would obviously be an advantage. They would require less cost because they might be simpler. They might require less disclosure. Although I think we need to put things into perspective here. When the EU decided to move to IFRS for listed entities back in 2005, well, the decision was taken earlier, but we moved to IFRS in 2005. And we looked at the cost of doing so. The recurring cost of the additional IFRS information for the smaller entities was measured at about 0.06% of turnover. So 0.06% of turnover. That's really quite small compared to the overall financing cost of a company. So there's not a lot of room for saving costs on the financial reporting production side. So yes, there is maybe some room for improvement, but maybe we should manage expectation here a little bit. There's not an awful lot of cost savings to be achieved. Also, one should bear in mind that less disclosure means that investors have less information. And from academic research we know that less information may mean that investors may require a higher rate of return because there's more uncertainty. So there is always this trade-off that needs to be borne in mind when reducing disclosures. Also, if you have a separate set of standards for SMEs just in the EU, that would have an effect on the comparability of SMEs accounting in the EU versus outside the EU, where they wouldn't be applying that set of standards. So comparability might be hampered there. And as I think Olivier already mentioned, whenever you set a threshold in terms of size, and you surpass the size, which you all hope with these growth companies, then what do you do on transition? And this is where proportionality comes in. You need a smooth transition if you set that separate set of standards, such that companies don't have to go through a whole new conversion process with all the costs attached. Maybe a few things from outside the EU. Do we see separate SME standards for listed entities outside the EU? And maybe I should mention a couple of examples from the developed markets. So do we see something similar in the US? Well, not really. There are a few exemptions for SMEs, but they're mainly on the non-financial side, so the management discussion and analysis. We see something similar being discussed in Canada, and in Australia there are no exemptions. So we also need to maybe better understand why in those developed markets there is apparently no need for let's say exemptions for SMEs on the equity markets. So let me try to close this by way forward. As Olivier already mentioned, it's very good that the European Commission wants to do this together with the IASB, and I think that's really important, because we don't want to create an EU island. Just with the IS regulation, we took the decision to turn this into a global set of standards. This is probably something where we have the same thing. We're together with the IASB. The advantage of that is that the IASB has realized that this is not just a problem for SMEs. There's a disclosure overload problem also for large entities. So they are already starting an initiative that's called Disclosure Initiative to reduce disclosures and make disclosures more entity specific. So take out the bits that are less relevant, focus on the bits that are more relevant, and also they are revisiting some of the accounting decisions they took, particularly on more complex areas. Just take as an example the whole goodwill impairment test, which I think many companies, not just SMEs, find very difficult to do every year. Here is where the IASB has indicated to be willing to revisit that. It's already put on the research agenda. So in that sense, it's very good that cooperation takes place. And actually, that cooperation might kill two birds in one stone, because if we can make in that project financial reporting more relevant and more specific to the needs of the investors, it would serve both SMEs as well as the large entities. And maybe we don't have to then go through a whole hassle of two separate set of standards with all of its maintenance and its endorsement, etc., etc. So, closing with that, I'd like to sort of hand over back to you, to the moderator, with this fruitful thoughts, and hopefully the discussion will help also the Commission in thinking about this and taking further steps. Thank you very much.